I'm thinking about Toby, who's sitting at home with his big sister being his childcare provider and his teacher because his mom, who's a full-time essential worker, doesn't make enough money to pay for full-time childcare. And Jessica, a parent in my district who had to turn down a job promotion she was offered because it just didn't pencil out and more than doubled her subsidy payment for her kids. And then there's Amy and her husband who have a new infant who's medically fragile, and they're unable to find care for their infant because childcare providers are not allowed, nor do they have the dollars for supports for one-on-one care that many of our fragile children need. The Fair Start for Kids Act will help them and hundreds and thousands of other children and families across the state. Did you know, Mr. President, that there are over 500,000 children in the state of Washington that don't have access to licensed child care? Because access is limited everywhere you go. And that full-time care for an infant is 113% more than the cost of in-state public college tuition, because child care is incredibly expensive. It hurts families and it hinders our recovery. Working families forego $14 billion a year because of lack of access to child care, and our businesses across the state of Washington lose more than $2.8 billion a year. The status quo has got to change. The Fair Start for Kids Act is the culmination of hundreds of hours of work with stakeholders from all over the state, and I am so thankful for their input and for their support. We have to support families, and we've got to meet the needs of children now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our economy has been sputtering. Thousands of women have left the workforce over the past year. Hundreds of small businesses are in danger of going under. The problem is worse in timber and farm country, where they're finding it hard to attract and keep doctors and nurses, businesses and workers. And half of our children don't meet the standards of readiness for kindergarten. Working families are struggling to meet basic everyday financial needs. Many parents and grandparents feel isolated raising their children and grandchildren. Too many full-time workers in childcare qualify for public assistance and lack health insurance even during this pandemic. Special education needs in K-12 are through the roof. How can we possibly address all of these issues? While the Fair Start for Kids Act won't fix every problem, it will be a huge help. And complicated problems need robust answers.
It is just such a privilege to be able to honor our senator and representative who have been such incredible champions for early learning, not this session, just this session, but for many sessions. You know, as someone who's worked on these issues for years, I am so incredibly impressed with how comprehensive Fair Start for Kids is and the number of issues that are included in the bill that we tried and failed to address in the past 5 or 6 years, from student parent to early childhood mental health to rates and eligibility, and the incredible issue of co-pays, which we know has been such a major barrier to parents being able to access care. So my hat's off to both of you, and my thanks for creating a much more equitable, much more accessible, affordable system for Washington State.
Well, thanks, Ruth. It's great to be here. And one of the reasons why we were able to be successful this year, frankly, is because we're building on the great work that you have done over so many years. So thank you for that. And that can't be understated, that we had an extremely strong foundation. I do really think that the issue this year came to the fore because of the pandemic. And frankly, because of Zoom. I mean, every single meeting every single business person, every single person who experienced that at some meeting or other had kids in the background, had a innate understanding of the fact that without schools open, without kids with a safe place to be, work couldn't get done and things were more hectic. And it was really acute among the business community who could not find employees, could not keep employees because they had to stay home to help their kids with schoolwork or just to take care of their kids. And we just saw that, and even hospitals couldn't hire and keep nurses and doctors because they didn't have anywhere to put their kids. So everything kind of came to a crescendo, if you will, of need, and that just built on what we already knew was a childcare crisis.
Senator Wilson.
Yeah, and I agree with all of what Representative Senn said, and I also am just thinking that there wasn't a soul that wasn't touched by this. And in the past, you may hear stories, but if it doesn't impact you implicitly, or you don't have that close touch, you can kind of push it away and forget that it exists. And I think every single story we heard was impacted by the fact that there was either no care, or there was care, but there was no dollars for that, or there were the providers closing. And I think the other thing, to tell you the truth, is as we looked at the Employment Security Department and the hundreds of thousands of individuals impacted by this pandemic, their stories, I think, that came through every single legislator's office that addressed not only issues related to kind of traditional things you would hear as a legislator from constituents, but just incredibly gut-wrenching stories of families really struggling and suffering. And I think it was unfortunately an opportunity to take advantage of that, and to believe that a larger group of individuals suddenly had a greater understanding that these are no longer just poverty programs, but these are programs that are dealing with our economic success as a state and as a country. And because of the inequities that have existed so very, very long, things got way worse for some, and worse for some that where they've never had an issue before. So I think that's what I would add to Representative Senn's conversation.
And frankly, just one other thing I have to say is that you guys have laid the groundwork over the past few years. We've really been talking about this issue, and having you strongly reach out to our colleagues, for you having people in almost every legislative district who could share their personal stories and really explain the need for childcare, also helped lay a critical foundation. So thank you and well done.
No, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So Fair Start for Kids is truly a comprehensive bill that has many components. What do you see as the most important pieces, particularly for families? And Senator Wilson, why don't we start with you this time?
Well, that's such a hard thing.
I know.
I just really want to say, I've been around for a long time, outside and inside, and we continue to try to support families. But I think I will also say this is the first time we've actually looked at small business and the industry of care. So I'm just going to say we did two things. One is that we did support and we give immediate relief to families as we think about co-pays, and also the copay cliffs that we know existed that will now go away. But on the industry side, immediate relief for providers and for business owners related to either pay, access to health care that they didn't have before, funds and grants that are available to provide increased dollars to, again, pay for the quality we know that so many have been providing, but we've not been able to, I think, pay them a fair share for. And also just acknowledging again the quality. We've worked on quality with the Early Start Act, and the Fair Start for Kids Act really was focused on access and increasing, sustaining, maintaining, and then growing the industry.
Tana?
Yes, as Senator Wilson said, and Ruth, you said too, I mean, this is really such a comprehensive bill. And sometimes when I'm talking about it, I'll end up going through and listing things that are in it. And then I'm like, oh yeah, and then this, and then that. And, it is almost overwhelming how much is in it, but it's so exciting. I would say there are a few things that in particular I'm excited about. One is assisting childcare providers with healthcare. I cannot believe that during a pandemic, we had schools closed, but childcare open, taking care of kiddos, and so many, almost all, childcare providers without access to healthcare. And so we are providing premium assistance for healthcare, help pay for healthcare for everyone at a childcare center or family home, and making sure that people know how to work with the exchange to find that healthcare. I think two of my other favorite parts are acknowledging and providing extra dollars for those who are providing dual language training and education. We know that like 50% of our kids under the age of 5 are kids of color, and so many of them are not speaking English as a first language at home. And to honor the skills and to honor their language and to frankly raise bilingual children who can help with our global economy. I'm so excited that we are, again, not just supporting that, but supporting those workers who have those skills and making sure that they are being recognized and receiving additional dollars. And then the third is always super, I'm passionate about is the mental health consultation and expanding that. Because we know that kids get kicked out of childcare 13 times more often than they do even out of K-12, which is just insane to think about. And so much of that is because of behavioral issues, because of trauma. And so providing more and more support for childcare providers and their families to make sure that those kids can get the help that they need and the teachers aren't quite as overwhelmed. The only other thing that one other thing I will just say is that I think as we are expanding the eligibility for families and reducing those copays, I'm really hoping that the parents who were not able to take a raise or who were not able to add the hours or go full time that they wanted to do because they were concerned about losing their childcare, they will now be able to take those jobs, those better paying jobs, advance their careers, putting more money in their pockets, as well as keeping more money in their pockets from lower copays. And I think that is just going to move more and more people out of poverty and get them a foot up. So I'm really excited about that.
Can I add one more thing that's different? Ooh, that's really within, and that is this idea of the side rails within the legislation, so that there are some things within the legislation that are not subject to appropriations. They have guardrails and side rails within, so that if in future legislative years there is a conversation about, well, we could cut it here, you can't do that without taking it back and actually changing that. And that is something that traditionally early care education, childcare has not experienced. I think we've been subject to budget, and so that's a huge step forward.